The Secret's Necklace by Jessie Paddock, narrated by Angel Reed. Chapter 1. 3 things happened to Penny Hope on August 30th. Well, not just 3 things, plenty of other things too. Regular stuff like brushing her teeth, frantically trying to tame her unruly bangs, slowly scrambling eggs for breakfast, and waving goodbye to her pet lizards. All normal, average occurrences proceeded without interruption. But there were 3 things that morning that proved especially significant. Life-changingly significant, in fact. First, her older brother Otis moved 2 hours away to Atlanta to take a job cooking at a fancy, smancy, don't eat with your hands kind of restaurant. Second, it was the first day of 7th grade. A grade Penny hadn't particularly been looking forward to, but up until her alarm clock went off, hadn't been dreading either. Third, Penny started sneezing. Correction, Penny started sneezing when she was nervous. It was an odd and inconvenient symptom. The trait did not run in the family. It was a quality entirely Penny's own. Penny had a sneaking suspicion all 3 major things that happened that day were related, but she didn't quite know how to put them together yet. They were all quite perplexing in their own ways. But that didn't matter. Understanding the 3 major things wouldn't change anything. Otis was gone, school was in session, and Penny couldn't stop sneezing her butt off. As the first 2 weeks of school went by, Penny found herself wishing for an instruction manual that laid out the steps of surviving middle school. A recipe she could follow, like the one she used to make chocolate chip cookies, chicken pot pie, or pancakes. A how to survive 7th grade without your BFF/older brother recipe. If only 7th grade were more like cooking, she'd be in great shape because, just like her older brother, Penny could cook. Correction, Penny could follow a recipe. And as far as Penny knew, cooking and recipe following were basically the same thing. So when Penny's nose started to tingle at 9:04 a.m. at the end of her poetry class, she knew what to expect. Sort of. Penny's desk was in the 2nd row all the way to the right. Penny was short for her age, possibly the shortest 7th grader at Lulwater Middle School, and her shoes barely touched the floor. She tapped the toes of her sneakers against the ground. Pit-pat, pit-pat. "We have time for one more reader," Miss Sandwich announced. Penny felt a tingle at the very tip of her nose, like a distant star coming to life, a stray spark from a bonfire, or the first freckle of summer. Then another. Then another. Tingle, spark, spark, tingle, spark. "Don't all volunteer at once now," Miss Sandwich added, chuckling at her own joke. The class was silent. Miss Sandwich came to Mr. Turney's English class once a week to teach poetry. She was a flustered lady. There was more hair out of her bun than in it. She had a habit of saying things that almost made sense, and she carried with her a massive bag that seemed to contain everything from colored pencils to water bottles to folders and folders of general documents. But despite her ridiculous name and her overwhelmed appearance, Penny liked Miss Sandwich. See, Miss Sandwich had introduced Penny to poetry, and to Penny Hope, writing poetry felt like spilling a too long-kept secret. In other words, poetry was a relief. Penny found she could write things on the page she'd never consider admitting out loud. Miss Sandwich's visits were the best part of 7th grade so far, excluding the 5 minutes at the end of class when Miss Sandwich asked for volunteers to share their writing aloud. Penny felt like that was a positively unnecessary part of the whole writing beautiful poems thing. Poetry was supposed to be private, something to be sealed in a box, meant for the creator's enjoyment alone. Penny did not sneeze when writing poetry. However, The mere thought of reading her poem aloud sent a geyser of sparks and tingles from the tip of her nose into her sinuses. Miss Sandwich paced in front of the classroom patiently. Despite her frazzled demeanor, her movement was almost menacing. "Any brave volunteers?" Silence. "Going once?" Without moving her head a millimeter, Penny darted her eyes around the classroom. She didn't want to draw any unnecessary attention to herself, but the sparks and tingles building up in her nose threatened to blow her cover. Couldn't someone just suck it up and raise their hands so this horrible waiting game would be over with and they could all just go about their days? The absolute last thing on earth Penny Hope wanted to do was volunteer to read her poem. "Going twice." "I can read my other piece," Mateo announced from the seat directly in front of Penny. Mateo always volunteered. It didn't matter what class. He'd been volunteering nonstop since the 3rd grade. The poem he'd read to the class just a few minutes earlier described an anticlimactic part of his favorite video game in a very generic detail. Snooze fest. "I'd like to give someone who we haven't heard from yet a chance," Miss Sandwich answered. Miss Sandwich, along with basically every other teacher who ever lived, had that very sneaky teacher-like habit of calling on the one unlucky kid who did not want to be seen. Penny sank a little lower in her chair. Only the top half of her eyeballs and her bangs remained above the horizon of her desk. Spark, tingle, spark, tingle. Not breathing was one of the more scientifically proven ways to clinch an oncoming sneeze of epic proportions, which was exactly what was building in Penny's nose. A tropical storm of a sneeze. And if the storm made landfall, Miss Sandwich would without a doubt notice her. "Remember, y'all, our final presentation is fast approaching, which I'm delighted to say, for those of you who don't remember, will be a poetry reading." A lot of strange things delighted Miss Sandwich. A big part of writing and art making in general is sharing your work and yourself with the world. Right now is a fabulous time to practice before you get on stage. She continued to pace around the room, and the class continued to ignore her plea for volunteers. Miss Sandwich just would not give up. "And remember, all of your work is still in progress. It's okay if it doesn't feel perfect or final yet." Tingle, tingle, spark, tingle. Penny looked down at her poem again. On her first day, Miss Sandwich gave every student what she called a poetry journal, a special notebook just for her class. Clearly homemade, with pieces of copy paper folded and stapled. Penny loved hers all the same. Miss Sandwich instructed everyone to write their names clearly on the front. But Penny couldn't help but write "Chef" on the front cover in bright purple marker. Why not, she thought. They'd been composing drafts of "Where I'm From" poems for the last 2 classes. Her precise handwriting spelled out 12 lines and 3 stanzas so far. Even her title was evocative, simultaneously mysterious and exciting. But after Mateo's video game poem and Cleo's pathetic attempt at rhyming before that, Penny considered the possibility that she misunderstood the assignment. According to Miss Sandwich, poetry was all about writing what your heart feels. Another instruction that almost made sense. Had Penny completely misread her own heart? Spark, spark, last chance, young artist. Penny's eyes watered, and she felt her breath catch in the back of her throat. She had the distinct sensation that she swallowed a small balloon. Tropical storm officially upgraded to hurricane status. Spark! 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 Category 2 hurricane in full effect. Speak now or forever hold your peace. And by forever, I mean until next class when we indulge in this whole charade again. Miss Sandwich took a step in Penny's direction. Did Penny have a bullseye on her forehead or something? Spark! Spark! Penny managed to shrink a little lower in her seat. The bone at the base of her neck bore into the back of her plastic chair. Her poor nose fizzed and tingled, her eyes watered, and her vision blurred. There was nothing she could do to stop it now. Penny rushed her hands to her face to stifle the explosion. Achoo! Penny's sneeze rumbled and shook her whole body, generating extreme power. Her chest jerked downward, thrusting her desk forward, knocking into the back of Mateo's chair. What the? Mateo said. At least momentarily, Penny felt better. No more tingles, no more sparks. No boogers had been harmed or released in the making of this sneeze. She blinked and slightly shook her head to reorient herself as she sat back up. Only then did she notice her missing poetry journal. Frantically, she scanned her surroundings. Had she sneezed every page into dust? No, not dust. Her poetry journal sat smack in the middle of the aisle, 2 desk lengths in front of her. Page open, all 12 lines and 3 stanzas face up and available for the entire world to see. It rested on the ground right beside Gianna King's perfectly double-knotted sneaker. Man down! Penny screamed as she leaped forward to interrupt. After many years of playing pool basketball with Otis, Penny knew how to dive for an object that seemed nearly out of reach. Screaming nonsense while you did it only made it more fun. Penny crashed to the ground, poetry journal safely in her outstretched hands, before anybody had the chance to see any of her precious 12 lines and 3 stanzas. The skin on her elbows burned as they squeaked against the floor, but Penny didn't care. Her words, her poem, and her heart were safe. Crisis averted, she whispered. Penny heard Miss Sandwich's voice from behind. Quite the dramatic interest, Penny H. That's me, Penny admitted as she scrambled to her feet. She didn't realize Miss Sandwich knew her name. Her first and last initial. Had her rugby-style nosedive been a bit dramatic? She glanced at her classmates. Some stifled laughs. Some did not stifle their laughs. Janiyah and Jane, the identical twins in the front row, looked identically frightened. Oh, that's gonna leave a mark, Cole shouted from the back row. Ugh, Cole's jokes were so elementary school. Penny darted her eyes back to Gianna to catch her reaction. She sat perfectly composed at her desk, not a hair in her 2 French braids out of place, hands in her lap as if completely immune to the fact that a crazed girl just had launched herself across the room screaming in order to retrieve a notebook. It did not make Penny feel good to be ignored by Gianna King. The stage is yours, Penny H. Miss Sandwich now stood at the back of the room, leaning against that dumb poster that said, Keep calm and love 7th grade language arts. We're excited to hear your work. Miss Sandwich always called writing work. Even if it was a free write, even if it was a sentence that made no sense, even if it was just a doodle. Penny kind of liked that. It made her feel professional, and on this disastrously sneezy day, it gave Penny just the boost of confidence she needed to remain at the front of the class. though for a moment she considered alley-hooping her way right out the door. "Okay," Penny said. Squeaked, rather. Miss Sandwich nodded, and Penny scurried her eyes to the ground. Reality set in. Penny Lorraine Hope, all 4'8" of her, stood in front of her class, clutching her homemade poetry journal that contained the most true and the most private combination of letters and words. Penny blinked, then blinked again. Her eyes remained laser-focused on the ground. She raised her journal, then a little higher, and a little higher, and just a few inches higher, and perfect! Her view of her classmates was entirely blocked. "Your poetry journal isn't a mask, my dear. Lower it, please, so we can see your face," Penny heard Miss Sandwich call. "And hear you," Mateo added. Yes, Mateo volunteered public speaking tips, too. So bossy. Penny slowly peeked over the top edge of the page. Miss Sandwich grinned back, along with the faces of 25 of her classmates. Like a scary movie she couldn't tear her eyes away from, Penny couldn't stop herself from peering around the room once again. That was a mistake. A big, big mistake. The boys towards the back got her attention first. TC had his fingers lodged deep in the mess of his very curly and very poofy hair, as if digging for treasure. Max appeared as if he were mouthing the words to a song. His eyes were gazed over but not closed. Theo sat beside them, staring straight at Penny with what surely had to be a devilish look in his eye. Cole flicked the eraser side of a pencil inside his cheek. His braces glimmered in the harsh overhead light. Unsanitary, Penny thought. The girl who always had gigantic lime green headphones around her neck doodled in her notebook, absorbed in another world entirely, it seemed. Gianna coughed, of course making sure to cover her mouth with her hand. "Treat this as a rehearsal. Remember to introduce yourself and say the title of your work before you start." Penny took a deep breath. "I'm Penny Hope," she said. Why did her full name suddenly sound so ridiculous when said out loud? Like the name of a doll or a dolphin at the zoo. Did everybody else think her name was so ridiculous? She couldn't quite tell. Based on the blank / bored looks on her classmates' faces, there was a good possibility. "Louder, Dimes!" Cole called from the back row. Ugh, why did he always call her that? So not inventive. "Tingle?" Laughter filtered through the class. After a few seconds, a blanket of chatter covered the room. Penny looked toward Miss Sandwich, who still leaned against the back wall. Why didn't Miss Sandwich say anything to hush the class? How could she let this happen? "I'm Penny Hope," Penny repeated. "Spark! And this is called Tingle?" Category 4 storm, gaining strength. Penny blinked back, the liquid forming in the inside corners of her eyes. Yes, she was blinking too much. She was positive. Penny thought, now Gianna and everyone would think I'm trying to cry. Penny didn't know how much, but she was certain that crying in front of your class while giving an oral presentation of sorts was not considered cool. Penny's hands trembled. The bottom of her feet felt clammy in her sneakers. "Now or never," a voice called. Maybe Theo, maybe Max. Penny opened her mouth to speak. She took the biggest breath she could muster, but the air came in ragged gulps, as if passing through the smallest holes on a cheese grater. She glanced at the paper just to confirm she knew the title of her poem. Of course she knew it. It was hers. There was nothing left to do but start. But Penny's voice wouldn't come out. Her nose tingled and sparked and tingled and sparked, and she stared at her classmates frozen. Well, her body froze like unthawed ice cream. Her brain, however, felt like rapidly boiling water, waiting for a handful of rigatoni to cook. Penny was spiraling and spiraling fast. Then, in a tone that reminded Penny of an alligator, Mateo offered, "I'll read it for her." Penny blushed and she jerked her poetry journal tight to her chest. Her poem was not Mateo's to read. "Actually," Penny interjected, finally finding her voice, I can't, not today. No way, no thank you." And then, maybe because her cheeks were bright red and her eyes burned, not from an oncoming sneeze, but kind of, maybe, sort of, because she was about to cry and she had to conceal her face ASAP. Or maybe because at the end of the day, Penny was just a bit theatrical. She took a grand bow. She heard one stray clap from the back of the room. Penny scuttled her sneezy self to her seat. Yes, an instruction manual with a recipe for surviving the most humiliating public speaking fail of all time would really have been helpful. Once seated, Penny kept her poetry journal hugged to her body. Her toes pitter-pattered the floor at the same tempo as her explosive heartbeat. Even though her feet easily reached the ground, Penny suddenly felt much shorter than 4'8". "Next time," Penny thought she heard Miss Sandwich say, though she couldn't be sure. Penny didn't dare look up, but she felt the weight of 25 sets of eyes on her, judging, ridiculing, and doing all the other scary, mysterious things 7th graders tended to do. "Okay, so as you all know, or as you all should know, I'm talking to you, TJ, Max, and Theo." Miss Sandwich had the sixth sense for those not paying attention. "Our end of semester performance will be in the auditorium. Spark? Tingle?" Miss Sandwich continued. "The entire middle school is invited. Your families are invited. Your long-lost friends and pets are invited. Everyone will have the opportunity to share one piece of work." The students started to rustle as the clock on the wall indicated class was over. Actually, class had been over for 30 seconds, an entirety in 7th grade time. "Beautiful job today, everyone. See you next week." Penny watched her classmates immediately start chatting, whooping, and in Cole's case, flexing his arm muscles. Between period pandemonium, she sat at her desk another moment and pit-patted her feet one last time. Her nose didn't tingle. She could take a deep breath with ease. And she didn't have that feeling in her mouth like she swallowed a balloon. The relief only lasted a few moments. Penny had chickened out. And as she was starting to learn, the feeling of chickening out was maybe worse than all the tidal wave sneezes combined. Penny stood to leave and stashed her petite poetry journal into her mostly empty backpack. It disappeared into the cavernous sack. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. 2 hours later, Penny sat at the far corner of a table in the far corner of the cafeteria. Nobody filled the remaining seats. She sat alone. After the absolutely rotten poetry class, Penny was in a foul mood. She ignored the crudité she brought for lunch and chewed on the inside of her cheek instead, deep in thought. Crudité, a fancy and French word for raw vegetables cut up and then arranged on a plate in a design to make them look valuable. The arrangement wasn't essential. They were still crudité if they came packaged in Tupperware or a plastic baggie. Penny preferred her raw vegetables with a side of ranch. Actually, she preferred her ranch with the side of raw vegetables. Once, she and Otis whipped up a homemade batch of the dressing. It was one of their few concoctions that paled in comparison to the store brand. Today, Penny bought a wide selection of crudité. Uniformly cut bites of carrots, celery, bell peppers, string beans, and then, just to shake things up a bit, and because they were basically the same size, mini corn straight out of the can. Penny was an efficient vegetable chopper thanks to Otis, who taught her how to properly use a knife. The air in the cafeteria was warmer than warm, stifling practically. The thing about North Georgia, usually everything was over air-conditioned until about at least November. The thing about Lower Middle School, half the buildings were old, with equally old pipes. Somehow, that also meant that the AC petered out halfway through the morning. Penny ran hot anyway, which she always considered a curious trait in someone so small for her age. Ghost pepper, Otis called her. One of the hottest chilies out there. Penny fanned herself with her hand, but it didn't help. She craved an ice bath. Another thing Otis taught her, if you are to blanch vegetables, aka throw them in a pot of furiously boiling water for just a couple minutes so the outside cooks a bit, but the inside remains crisp, it's necessary to throw them in an ice bath. A big bowl of ice water. Afterwards, to stop the cooking process. Penny shook herself out of her memory state. Enough about Otis. Now that he was gone, she had to make some friends her own age. That much was apparent. Perhaps it was no coincidence that the corner seat at the corner table she sat in almost every lunch since the start of 7th grade afforded her a wide view of the cafeteria action. Penny had always been a bit of a floater. She wasn't tied down to any specific clique, no stressful obligations of loyalty. She had never minded not having a group. She'd always had Otis and her lizards at home to keep her company. But with Otis gone and the lizards nonverbal as ever, Penny was starting to think that maybe there was more to middle school than her self-proclaimed floater status. Maybe having a few companions wouldn't be so bad after all. Problem was, not even 3 weeks into 7th grade, and everything seemed settled. Cliques had formed, groups had adhered with invisible glue stickier than toffee. Cooking relaxed Penny. It was predictable, like math and science. And better than math and science if you got the equation right. A reward awaited on the other side in the form of a sweet or savory treat. If you followed the recipe, you knew what you were going to get. Penny had searched far and wide, but couldn't find no recipe for 7th grade success. All of her initial friend-making attempts fell flat, like skillet cornbread made with expired baking powder. And it wasn't like Penny hadn't tried. Oh, she tried. Friend-making attempt, step 1. Penny approached the sporty girls first. The volleyball girls and the basketball girls were a bit too tall, so Penny figured she'd ease her way in, starting with the soccer crew. Sports kids seemed like a good target. They'd know all about teamwork and general companionship. It seemed most of the soccer girls played for a team called the Bel Air Fire. They wore their team jackets to school, even when it was too hot for a tank top. Penny spent some time on the internet the night before searching soccer things. And that's literally what she typed into Google. Soccer things to talk about. Excited for the World Cup? She marched right up to the girl with red hair but no freckles. Penny didn't know her name. She stood in a triangle with Reem and Shayla. Or Shayla and Reem? Penny could not remember who was who, though they didn't look anything alike. Reem was a frizzy-haired brunette with dramatic eyelashes, and Shayla's tresses hung in a limp blonde ponytail, exposing a galaxy of brown freckles across her nose and cheeks. The 3 soccer girls all stood in the hallway with soccer bags slung over one shoulder, backpacks on the other. The World Cup is in like 3 years, but sure, red hair, no freckles answered. Reem and Shayla, or Shayla and Reem, giggled. Well, it's going to be a good one. Anyway, how's the pitch? Not too slippery for your boots? Pitch, another word for field. Boots, another word for cleats. Penny's search had yielded some very sports-specific vocabulary. Reem and Shayla, or Shayla and Reem, furrowed their respective brows. Red hair, no freckles. What was her name? Adjusted the strap on her shoulder, but said nothing. Penny felt a telltale tingle in her nose, but she persevered. Me, I prefer to play Division I soccer before going pro right away. I mean, it would be cool to live in Europe and all. Penny didn't mention that the reason it would be cool to live in Europe was that she could get hands-on culinary training abroad. But I think that the university system prepares young athletes well, Penny said, as if she knew exactly what young athletes needed to thrive. Penny had memorized the last part. I just want to make varsity, Reem or Shayla said, as if it were an apology. You will, the other one assured. For sure, Penny agreed. When they turned to go a moment later, presumably to practice, Penny waved goodbye, but couldn't remember any of the other soccer things to talk about. So she kept her mouth shut. They'd left before she even had a chance to sneeze. Sure, Penny appreciated a good sprint and a buzzer shot to win the championship, but she was no athlete, at least not in the physical sense. Next! Fran making attempt step 2. With sports out of the question, Penny turned her attention to the gang of compounding scientists. Their words, not hers. They posted a flyer saying the inaugural gang of compounding scientists meeting would be later that week at lunch. Scientists seemed like a sure bet. After all, cooking was basically science. Penny planned to tell them that at the first meeting. But when Penny saddled up to join the 4 members, science seemed to be the last thing on anybody's mind. Against all odds, there were 2 sets of identical twins at Lower Water Middle School, Samson and Sullivan Porter, and Jane and Janiyah Janunzi. Samson and Sullivan had different haircuts, but the girls were absolutely impossible to tell apart. The squad, which hung out incessantly, was the founding and only members of the gang of compounding scientists, as it turned out. Penny approached their table and asked, "Gang of compounding scientists here?" The 2 pairs of matching eyes looked up and nodded. "New member reporting for duty." Penny made a peace sign with her right hand, because at the time it seemed right. They didn't make room for Penny to sit, so she stood. That was fine. She spent all day sitting at a dumb desk anyway. "So, I was thinking I'd be a great addition to your club, or gang," she corrected. Shoot, she messed up already. Spark, tingle! She planned on explaining herself by saying something like, "Because I'm very experienced in what some consider the ancient art of baking, I know a thing or two about emulsification too." But the more her nose sparked and tingled, the less confident she felt about her intro speech. "Actually, we're not doing club stuff. We're in the middle of Fantasy Dream House," Samson said. That didn't sound very scientific to Penny. It actually sounded like the exact opposite of scientific, but she figured she'd play along. Penny brushed her bangs out of her eyes and said, "Cool. You can sit down," one of the girl twins offered, without actually moving to make room. "It's all good," Penny answered, though her feet were beginning to hurt. That was okay. She needed to toughen them up anyway. Professional cooks had to spend hours on their feet at a time. "Room made out of diamonds that smells like cotton candy body spray and tastes like campfire marshmallows," one of the girl twins declared. "Anti-gravity room, duh," the other girl twin piggybacked. Sure, Samson said in agreement. "Room just for the parakeets," Sullivan added. "That's so sweet," Penny couldn't help but exclaim. Sullivan looked at her like his Fantasy Dreamhouse contribution was obvious. Penny's shoulders dropped a bit. A handful of sparks and tingle pinged in her nose. She shifted her weight to her right foot to give her left leg a rest. "Your turn, souls," Parakeet Twin said. "After much thought, I must confess, my Fantasy Dreamhouse would not be complete without a room made entirely of sheepskin-covered trampolines. Because, trampoline burn." So obvious. Obvious, but necessary, Sullivan said without missing a beat. Then they all looked at Penny. It was her turn. Her audition, really. Though Penny had never officially played Fantasy Dream House, she was pretty sure she understood the rules. My Fantasy Dream House would have a room with a cool kitchen? Does that work? What Penny meant was a kitchen that was actually just a big pantry with all sorts of high-tech equipment like a cast iron waffle maker, a mandolin slicer, an immersion blender, stand mixer, ice cream maker, one of those laser thermometers that tells the temperature of the thing you pointed at. The list was basically endless. Don't ask me. Your fantasy dream house, your rules, one of the boy twins said matter-of-factly. Something about the way he said it made Penny's stomach feel like applesauce. Without an additional spark or tingle as a warning, Penny sneezed. Bless you, Jane and Janiyah said at the same time. The boy twins both wiped their hands on their pants, even though they were not the ones who sneezed. When lunch ended, the gang of compounding scientists disappeared. Penny saw them eating together the next day, but she couldn't tell if it was an official meeting. She was too nervous to go up and ask, so she slunk to the only empty table, the one in the far corner of the cafeteria, and settled into the seat closest to the wall. Penny ate at the corner table alone every day since. So there Penny sat, watching the soccer girls and the gang of compounding scientists, along with basically every other kid, nosh on chicken fingers. In that moment, her treasured crudités felt lifeless and inadequate. All of her classmates just raved about the quality of chicken fingers served in the lower water cafeteria. Penny was no fool. She loved chicken fingers just as much as the next kid, but she didn't mess with the ones from the cafeteria. She could and had made better. Penny wondered what had gone wrong in her friend making attempts. Was she unlikable? Penny didn't believe that. Otis always said she was the coolest person 6 years younger than him that he knew. How was everyone nailing it except her? She just needed a way to figure out what bonded these other kids together, what they liked, disliked, etc. What were they thinking? Then she'd have a leg up. Penny's eyes finally settled on Gianna's table as if it were a magnet. That was often where her gaze landed. Gianna and her best friends Nayeli and Rose sat at the table in the center of the room. Not within eavesdropping distance, that would have been exciting, but certainly at a safe distance to observe. Gianna, Nayeli, and Rose were three of the more fascinating 7th graders at Lowater Middle School. But Gianna in particular interested her most of all, which brought Penny to her next friend-making attempt, yet to be executed. Gianna King, the gateway friend. Everyone loved Gianna. She was the most popular girl in school, and unlike every teen movie ever written, it wasn't because she was a mean girl whom everyone feared. Nope. Gianna wasn't just nice, she was the nicest. What was also crazy was that Gianna was brand new. Hot out of Atlanta, she joked when asked. Apparently, Gianna had moved to Lowater at the beginning of summer. She must have met Rose and Nayeli at the pool or something. That was the only way to explain how just 2 weeks into 7th grade, she already had not one, but 2 best friends. Gianna King was the type who gave everybody a Valentine. She smiled at you first. When you gave her a compliment on her shoes or jacket, she told you where you bought them without you even having to ask. She always shared the candy she brought from the vending machine. Gianna wanted to be an actress when she grew up. Not film, but Broadway. She didn't need braces. Her teeth were perfectly imperfect. The front one on the right ever so slightly angled out. She was so friendly, chatting with anyone and everyone. Cheeks always slightly flushed, a charismatic spring in her step. Rumor had it she gave great hugs. Not that Penny knew. She never had the good fortune to receive a famous Gianna King hug. Yes, Gianna King was the kind of seventh grader who couldn't make a mistake if she tried. Confident, calm, collected, and perfect. Gianna King was the gateway friend Penny needed. If she could make friends with Gianna, the rest of the kids at Lowerwater Middle School would be eating out the palm of her hand. Literally. Once they were officially friends, Penny planned on presenting Gianna with 3 dozen of her famous peanut lover butter cookies to share with anyone and everyone. Penny sighed and packed up the remains of her lunch. 3 more hours left of school. She could make it, right? She hadn't talked to Otis in several days and was curious to hear about his last few shifts. He started AM prep, the morning shift, where he cut up a gazillion vegetables, measured tons of ingredients for dinner recipes, and washed the occasional dish. But quickly moved up to PM prep. The same thing, but a shift began at 3 instead of 7 a.m. Penny planned to text him from the magnolia tree in her backyard the second she arrived home. Just then, Penny smelled a deliciously fresh hair product she couldn't place. She glanced up and saw Gianna walking by. Her lips were slightly glossed, her hair dark and shiny enough. She looked straight ahead, backpack resting evenly on her shoulders. Without the slightest warning, Penny sneezed so hard she feared ranch dressing might come out of her nose. When Penny looked up, expecting to see a disgusted look on Gianna's face, instead, to her astonishment, Gianna didn't so much as glance in Penny's direction. She proceeded forward, undisturbed. Gianna's indifference burned, a sizzling drop of oil springing up from a hot fire skillet, tiny as a carbonation bubble, but searing nonetheless. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. That evening, Penny sat in the magnolia tree on the branch that looked like a bat wing. That branch hung 10 feet above the ground, but Penny could have climbed up blindfolded. It was the one place on earth Penny Hope knew by heart. She was on a break, self-induced break. A pot of everything but meat vegetable soup, Otis's name, not hers, simmered on the stove, and 1-drop biscuits cooked in the oven. Dinner for 4. Mom, Dad, Sylvia, Penny's step-grandma, who insisted on being called by her first name, and of course, Penny. With Otis gone, Penny took it upon herself to cook dinner for her family as often as possible. She faced no challenges for the position. Sylvia refused to do anything more exerting than a crossword puzzle once the sun had set, and Penny's parents worked a lot. Like, a lot. The Hopes lived in Lowerwater, a resort town that never quite took off. That's how Mom put it. Nestled right between a smattering of North Georgia lakes and the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It wasn't quite close enough to either attraction to be convenient. It was, however, extremely well placed for the heating and air conditioning business her parents started 4 years ago. O&P temperatures. Think about it, they said. Mountain houses need heat and lake houses need AC. They weren't wrong, Penny supposed, because they were still a small family-run business after all. Dad's words, not hers. And it was amazing how temperature emergencies routed directly to Mom's cell phone came at all hours of the day and night. Mom's words, not hers. Dad often returned home hours after dark, only to leave again at dawn, and Mom was often on the phone fielding service requests. They moved into the little house on Plum Street from an apartment complex across town when Penny was 8. It was the first place they lived where they had their own standalone mailbox. Penny spent hours staring out the window waiting for the mailman to come. After throwing a mini tantrum about never receiving any mail of her own, Otis occasionally left her notes with imaginary return addresses. She'd saved every one. Penny looked at the timer on her phone. 12 more minutes on the biscuits. Penny loved making a family meal. Also, what restaurants served their staff at the beginning of a shift. It suited her just fine. Better than fine, really. It was a great practice. She could test out all the recipes she wanted because Mom, Dad, and Sylvia were not picky eaters. She closed her eyes and inhaled, savoring the damp, mossy air that rushed through her nose and into her lungs. Her short legs dangled on either side of the bat wing-shaped branch. Speaking of love, Penny also adored the magnolia tree in their backyard. It felt like a private kingdom. This particular magnolia was very tall, at least a gazillion years old, Otis had told her. Yes, magnolia trees were special, but the magnolia tree in the Hope's backyard was especially magnificent. The tree towered at 60 feet tall. Penny had climbed to the top only once, before realizing she'd still have to get back down. The magnolia tree was best at night, though. That was when it felt the most private. From Penny's perspective on the bat wing-shaped branch, the leaves were so thick she could neither see nor feel the world outside. She shared the canopied space only with the fireflies persistent enough to penetrate. The inside of the magnolia was a universe, and the twinkling bugs were the stars. Magic. She and Otis had spent hours in that tree, talking, laughing, and sometimes in silence. The sigh of the breeze through the leaves, the only semblance of chatter. Penny took out her phone. Otis was probably in the middle of a shift, but sometimes she'd be able to catch him when there was a lull moment in the restaurant. Your veg soup and 1-drop biscuits tonight. Jealous? Otis replied right away. Vitamix to my right, stand mixer to my left. Jealous, Ghost Pep? Otis loved to brag about the fancy equipment in the fancy restaurant where he worked. Audiobook, the spot was called. One of the finest restaurants in Atlanta. Penny had never been. According to Otis, it was stuffy, but great for his resume. Plus, he might as well learn the basics from the best. On his first day, he sent her pictures of the commercial kitchen. Penny stared at the photos time and time again. The giant walk-in freezer, the size of her bedroom, packed with cuts of meat she never heard of. The floating metal shelves in the prep space lined with gigantic containers of flour, dried beans, and sugar. And all the tools. Dozens of sauté pans hanging from the hooks, rows of Vitamixes, the most powerful blender ever, stoves with burners the strength of bonfires. But the coolest part was the open kitchen. Unlike a lot of restaurants, at Audiobook, there was no division between the part of the restaurant where the people ate and the kitchen where the food was cooked. Customers could actually watch the line cooks juggle multiple orders and plate the dishes. V-gel, Penny typed back. Then, any luck on PBTTB? Otis suggested project better than the box. The day he revealed he had gotten a job and would be moving a few days later. Penny was inconsolable. She locked herself in her room and refused to come out until her eyes dried and her face depuffed. Penny was not a fan of public crying. And yes, even family members counted as part of the public when it came to crying. When Penny finally emerged, toughest expression she could muster glued to her face, Otis presented her with a stack of pancakes. It was Saturday morning after all, and a challenge. Neither Penny nor Otis Hope were ones to shy away from a challenge, especially when a recipe was involved. Project better than the box. Invent a recipe for yellow cake that's more delicious than the kind that's made from the box. Despite both Otis and Penny's appreciation for all dishes made from scratch, neither sibling loved anything quite as much as processed cakes. Their absolute hands-down favorite was yellow cake made from the box, the kind where you just mix in eggs, oil, and water. Over time, they'd made that cake at all special occasions, which, in the 12 years Penny had been alive, were mostly birthdays. Not all, but mostly. The project sounded simple, but easier said than done. With cake, despite the finite amount of ingredients, there were still a considerable number of variables. Flour, sugar, eggs, butter, milk, baking soda, and vanilla could be combined in so many ways. What kind of flour? All-purpose, cake, or some combination? Room temperature eggs or eggs straight from the fridge? Butter high in fat, the French way, or regular unsalted? In the 2 weeks since Otis had moved, she tried 2 different variations. Both were good, but not great. Neither were better than the box. Penny wanted to win the challenge. Beating her professional cook of a big brother was not a title she took lightly. In the back of her mind, though, she dreaded the day either of them emerged as victors. Their competition reminded Penny that they were still connected, even if they were 2 hours, 2 roofs, and seemingly 2 worlds away. Once the project was over, the invisible cord would be cut. Penny's nose tingled, then sparked, then tingled again. She let her phone screen lock to black. She took another deep breath and watched the fireflies. She liked how they never blinked in the same spot twice. 4 minutes later, her timer went off. Otis still hadn't responded, so Penny issued a taunt. "Don't think you have a leg up because of the stand mixer. Ghost Pep never loses." And then a request. "Also, when you think we can come to the resto?" With that, Penny shoved her phone into her back pocket, scrambled out of the magnolia tree, and trotted into the house to retrieve her biscuits out of the oven. After the soup and biscuit dinner, everyone assumed position. Dad snored on the couch in front of the fish tank full of free-range lizards. His description, not hers. A few years ago, he came home with a fish tank he gotten on sale. They filled it with neon goldfish, but the filter proved too powerful and sucked the poor dudes right up within a week. Not willing to risk another goldfish casualty, he turned the tank into a lizard box, filled only with little lizards they found in the yard or at clients' houses. Dad had cut out TV for his New Year's resolution, so after dinner he watched the lizards instead. They didn't move much, and he always fell asleep within minutes. Mom retreated upstairs, headset still in, customer servicing in her pajamas. Only Sylvia and Penny remained at the kitchen table. Penny carefully looked over Sylvia's shoulder at her crossword puzzle. Keyword, carefully. Sylvia was 1 part ladybug, 1 part summer breeze, and 1 part snapping turtle. Sylvia's words, not Penny's. Every clue was crossed off except for one. 46 across might just kill me, Sylvia said, not taking her eyes off the paper. Sylvia did crossword every day. To keep my mind sharper than yours, she said. Yours referring to anyone and everyone. Doubt it, Penny replied. Penny knew Sylvia well enough to know that saying anything that indicated you didn't want Sylvia around was a big mistake. Ha! No 6-letter word can take me down! Sylvia punched her right fist in the air. Didn't think so, Penny confirmed. Want me to look up the answer on my phone? Don't be a fool, Sylvia shot back. Penny smiled. She liked Sylvia's sharp tongue. They went through this routine often. We don't cheat around here, the two said together. No, we don't cheat, Penny repeated. Unless you know who's going to win the horse race. Then we cheat. There were a few things that Sylvia loved. Betting on horses, crossword puzzles, and romance novels. Sylvia was truly like nobody Penny had ever met. Penny stood and went to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. She wanted to take another stab at Project Better Than the Box before bed. It was Friday night after all. Why not go a little wild? As Penny began taking ingredients out of the pantry, she said, Last go was a little too spongy, so I'm thinking less bee powder. When the spirit moved her, she liked to narrate her process. Though Sylvia rarely responded, she still felt like a worthy audience. Penny measured out the dry ingredients into a mixing bowl. Sylvia said, hunched over her puzzle. And I stand by my decision that room temperature eggs just make more sense. But to double confirm, I'll use 2 right out of the fridge today. 2 eggs didn't provide the body I hoped for, but I'm thinking that's because I used the hand mixer. I'll use the whisk next time. You can't overbeat eggs and expect success, right, Sylvia? We'll taste test this one together, okay? Sylvia usually provided Penny's first taste test for a new recipe, mostly due to proximity rather than interest. I'm also going to add some bacon, applesauce, and a lizard tail. Sound good? Bake away, Ghost Pepper. 45 minutes later, Penny carefully took the cake out of the oven. The 2 major Project Better Than the Box rules were that you had to finish eating one cake before starting the next. Wasteful is just distasteful, Otis said. And no taste testing with icing. Once the cake had slightly cooled, Penny cut 2 small squares, one for her and one for Sylvia. What do you think? Penny asked after a few chews. Needs icing if you ask me. Sylvia, you know taste testing with icing is cheating. Crowds the palate. I don't cheat, declared Sylvia. The cake was mediocre. Average. Not better than the box. Quite a bit worse than the box in actuality. Penny lay in bed that night mulling over it. Probably an egg issue, she thought. Or could it be a temperature of the oven issue? Or not enough vanilla extract issue? Maybe she needed a stand mixer or some tool she just didn't have. Or worse, didn't even know existed. Lots of potential issues. The variables shifted through Penny's brain as her mind started to fog with sleep. Penny checked her phone one last time before rolling onto her side. No text back from Otis. Dinner service must have been busy. No Project Better Than the Box news to report anyway. She hadn't discovered the recipe. Not just yet. Chapter 4. Chapter 4. Penny girl, take a ride with me. Penny looked up from her phone. She'd spent the rainy Saturday morning lounging on the couch, perusing recipes online. Apparently, she'd been doing that for hours. She could really get lost down that rabbit hole. Where? Tina's. Tina, Mom's BFF since their Friday night skate days, whatever that meant, owned and operated a thrift store a few towns over. At the start of every season, she ran a clothing drive. 4 times a year, Molly Hope used her client service skills for a good cause. O and P temperatures will pick up and drop off, meaning Molly Hope accepted bags of donated clothes from their residential clients and brought them, on her own time, to Tina's treasures. We all have an obligation to give back, she said. Got a record-breaking haul. I'm going to need some extra hands. Penny rolled onto her side. Tina's treasures did have a hit-or-miss used appliance section where she scored a decent mixing bowl once. But it was also a 45-minute drive away. It's so far, Penny complained. The couch was so comfortable. The outside was so rainy. Benny's for breakfast? Penny shot right up. Give me 5! Benny's was an ice cream stand in Mason Hill, just down the block from Tina's. Best ice cream on the planet. They also served coffee in the morning, and if you played your cards right, or happened to have a mom who went to high school with Miss Bendy herself, they'd open up the ice cream vault as early as 8 a.m. Penny was a big fan of eating foods at untraditional times of day. Breakfast for dinner got a lot of attention, but that invitation didn't hold a flame to dessert for breakfast. Ice cream as a first meal of the day was Penny's favorite decadence. Penny fiddled with her phone, while Mom drove down the windy back roads. Mom avoided the interstates when she could help it. The scenery was better off the highway. The North Georgia forest sometimes had a mystical quality to it, especially at the tail end of an early morning rain. Through the dense trees, fog dusted the top of the distant Blue Ridge Mountains. "So, how was the second week of 7th grade, Penny girl?" Mom asked. "Awful, embarrassing, confusing, all of the above?" "It was okay," Penny answered. "Just okay?" "Yeah, same, Penny deferred. They drove another minute in silence. A cheesy old Heat Squad song played on the radio. Mom hummed along. "Don't know if I'm awake. You're my dream reality." Mom sang a few notes under pitch. "So," Penny interrupted. She loved Mom and liked Heat Squad okay, but couldn't really handle the two of them together. "Otis said he'd probably be able to get us a friends and family reservation at Ordrdry like any day now, so maybe we can go soon?" Even though the restaurant booked up months in advance, thanks to a glowing review in Fine and Dine magazine, Otis said he'd probably be able to get them a friends and family reservation and a discount. Cha-ching! The beginning of truffle season was fast approaching, according to Otis and the internet. Penny had never tried a truffle, the mysterious mushroom that came from Italy and tasted like something called umami, which was an equally mysterious extra taste bud or something. Truffles were impossible to come by in Lowell water and equally impossible to afford. But Otis said he'd try to hook it up. By the end of the month, I'm thinking. Penny did the quick math. 20 days left in September. An eternity, basically. Is all Mom said. Penny couldn't tell if Mom was responding to her or humming to the song. A high-pitched teenage boy's voice wafted through the car speakers. Penny quickly typed out a text to Otis. He was certainly still sleeping at this hour, but he'd see it when he woke up. "Mom's in for F&F. End of Sept." Before Penny could explain all she knew about truffles, Mom's phone rang. "I swear," she mumbled, working to untangle the wires of her earbuds before the call went to voicemail. "If I had known there'd be so many AC emergencies, I'd stayed in retail and call it a dang day." Earbuds in, call accepted. "Thank you for calling O&P Temperatures. This is Molly. How may I help you today?" "Sorry," she mouthed to Penny, but Penny was used to it. She rested her head against the window and drifted off into a windy, bumpy snooze. "I know you're not bringing that drippy cone into my store," Roxana called from behind the counter without looking up. "It's not your store!" Penny shouted from outside the door. She shoved the last bite of her pistachio-saturated waffle cone into her mouth. "Morning, Roxana," Mom said sweetly as she breezed into the store, giant sack of clothes over her shoulder. "Tina here? I'm gonna make her day." Roxana just pointed towards the back. "Thank you, love." Mom was not fazed by Roxana. "You have some sprinkles on your cheeks," Roxana grumbled as Penny shuffled into the store. "Do not." "But you do." Roxana was a weirdo. Penny didn't not like her, but she also hoped for Roxana's sake and Tina's she'd find a new job soon. Roxana had worked at the register at Tina's Treasures for as long as Penny could remember, and she seemed to hate every second of it. Penny admired Roxana for the risk she took with her remarks and with her bangs. Both were severe. Roxana's resting face could make any new and vulnerable customer run out of the store in tears. Penny wasn't scared of her, though. She was used to hanging out with older kids, all of Otis's friends. Roxana was vaguely Otis's age, Penny thought. "Goldfish don't have stomachs," Penny called as she walked into the kitchenware section. She always did her best to throw Roxana off. It rarely worked, but it was always fun to try. Penny strolled towards the appliance aisle. She heard Mom and Tina gabbing in the back of the store. Once they got started, there was no stopping them. Penny had ample time to peruse. Much of the inventory in the appliance aisle had been there for ages. Mixed-match forks, creaky toasters, a chipped punch bowl, things that looked almost functional. But every now and then, Penny found a gem, or more amply put, a treasure. Penny had her hopes up for one or 4 items in particular. A stand mixer, possible but unlikely. A Vitamix, would take a miracle. A slushy machine, not out of the question. And a pour-over coffee maker. Penny didn't drink the stuff yet, but when she started, she planned to slurp it in every style. As Penny turned into the aisle, she let her fingertips drip over the merchandise jutting off the overstuffed shelves. The recipe box rested on the end of the bottom shelf, nestled between a rusty skillet and an electric kettle that maybe never been cleaned. It caught Penny's eye immediately. Penny wouldn't have been able to explain why the box stood out. It wasn't the object's newness alone. It was a simple brown box, the front about the size of an index card, with the word recipe carved on top in precise lettering. Penny leaned over to retrieve the object from the shelf, gently, as if carrying a baby bird to safety. She opened the lid and saw the inside was painted a rich cherry red. Penny flipped through the dozen or so recipe cards inside. Rectangles with recipe name, ingredients, and directions printed on the front. Every card was blank, just waiting to be filled in. She was about to close the lid when something else caught her eye, a glint of silver behind the very last recipe card. Penny peered closer and found a necklace. A delicate silver chain threaded a key-shaped charm. A small circular stone set at the top of the key. Penny examined the stone. An enthralling dark blue, but not quite. It was a color she'd never seen before. What color was it? Not black, not purple. It just felt deep, like staring into outer space. Penny touched the stone again with the tip of her pinky. It was ice cold. Instantly, Penny felt refreshed, as if she just downed a mint lemonade on the hottest day of summer. The only jewelry Penny wore was a pair of small circular stud earrings and an anklet made out of ribbon that just wouldn't fall off. The necklace was the perfect addition that Penny hadn't known she needed. Penny couldn't help but feel that this plain yet delicate necklace was meant for her.
5 minutes, Penny girl, Mom called. And you better hold me to it.
Penny heard Mom and Tina's distant laughs, but all her attention was on her newfound treasure. Penny quickly pulled the necklace out of the box, snapped the lid shut, and marched to the register. "Neither does a platypus, you know," Roxana said once Penny approached. Roxana stared at Penny and narrowed her eyes.
"What?"
Roxana pointed to her belly. Penny laughed. Roxana huffed, but Penny caught the slight twitch of a smile in the corner of her mouth. "Does this necklace come with a recipe box?" Penny asked. She opened her palm to reveal the charm. "Does it look like I make the rules?" "I honestly do not know." Sometimes Penny wished Roxana would just answer the darn question. Roxana searched under the tin for a price sticker. "Secrets necklace, $12. "No, not just the necklace, the box too. Also, not a secret." Roxana leaned in closer and spoke very slowly. "Does it look like I make the rules?" Penny truly could not tell if Roxana was doing her a favor or threatening her well-being. It was more hilarious than scary. Roxana then turned the box over so Penny could see. Sure enough, the sticker on the bottom described the item as Secrets Necklace. Odd. Okay, so 12 for everything? The box, recipe cards, and necklace? You teeny boppers can be so dense, Roxana said, rolling her eyes. Penny wasn't sure what a teeny bopper was. "I'm in 7th grade, if you're wondering. I think you should know that by now." Penny had been coming to Tina's with her mom since practically the beginning of time. 12 bones. Take it or leave it. Penny slapped a $10 bill on the counter just as Mom emerged from her gossip session with Tina. Sometimes it was best to play hardball with Roxana. Penny girl, you got to keep me honest. You know I lose track of time back there. Without another word, Roxana picked up the tin and pushed the box toward Penny with one finger, as if it were covered in raw eggs, too bacteria-infested to touch. Penny took that as permission to clasp the necklace around her neck. Hey, Penny baby, a voice called from the back office. Tina rarely showed her face on the premises. Part of a necessary mystique, she insisted, whatever that meant. Hey, Miss Tina, Penny shouted back. Come on, let's go, Penny. Dad called about a new service appointment scheduled for 2. Yay! Bye, Roxana. Love you. See you next time. Bye. Love you. Don't mean it. Penny gave Roxana a peace sign because she thought it looked cool. And because, in all honesty, she thought Roxana could benefit from some calming vibes. Later, Penny added over her shoulder as she walked out the door. Recipe box in one hand, necklace around her neck. The rain finally stopped, yielding a radiant sunshine. Steam rose off the asphalt parking lot, and the air was already thick and humid. Penny felt a tingle right below the dip in her collarbones. Unlike Penny Hope, the silver necklace with the key-shaped charm ran very, very cold. Chapter 5. Chapter 5. Otis finally texted Penny back late Sunday night. Early Monday morning, technically. When Penny woke up for school, the awaiting message gave her a little jolt. Crazy weekend. Weeds non-stop. Better be keeping it weird up in Elwater for me. Penny smiled. She loved, just loved, when Otis used kitchen lingo. Weeds, or in the weeds, meant super duper, can't think straight, maybe messed up in order busy. Talking to Chef this week, ask about F&F. Prob 3 weeks at least. Penny's smile faded. 3 weeks? That was basically forever away. Why so long? She replied. It wasn't the 3 weeks that bothered her. It was the at least. That sounded like the opposite of promising. What if I bring my world-famous peanut butter lover cookies? Penny hoped that would do the trick. Otis was a sucker for anything peanut butter, baked or otherwise. He swore nobody made peanut butter lover cookies as good as Penny. As the morning continued, Penny wasn't able to shake the rotten mood. The fact that it was 4th of July weather in mid-September certainly didn't help. It was only 8:05 a.m. and already muggy. Sometimes Penny wished they lived in Chicago. She heard it was cold there. Or better yet, Norway. Or the top of Canada. Or maybe they could just do summer in the North Pole. Anywhere that wasn't 85 degrees with 85% of humidity in mid-September. Penny appreciated a good heat wave or two in May, but these early autumn temperatures were a little much. Penny wiped her brow and crossed the street towards Lowerwater Middle School. Her bangs stuck to her forehead. Bangs were worth it 7 months out of the year, just long enough to make her forget about the hottest months when they weren't. Yes, Penny ran hot. Ghost pepper hot. The entrance to Lowerwater Middle School was wonky and grand. The facade implied academy, not small-town public school. The main building had once been a bank or a train station or some sort of important government building that couldn't be altered or touched for historic landmark reasons. The walls were made of old red brick, and the windows were extra tall with arched tops. Thick columns propped up a sort of overhang, sheltering the area outside the front entrance to the school. The cavern, students called it, for reasons to do with dampness and lack of natural light. Before and after school, the cavern was the place to be, with the exception of the East Hallway, which contained gym, cafeteria, and a few creaky classrooms. All other structures were brand new. All this meant, as far as Penny was concerned, was that she had to wait until second period science when she had a class in the West Wing for adequate air conditioning. O and P temperatures would really have a field day if they can get their hands on that middle school. Penny was so hot and so slimy, and the cavern was so crowded and noisy. Students congregated in claustrophobic clumps, as if savoring their last minutes of non-classroom time. Penny did not understand why it was necessary to socialize in the condensed area when there was plenty of room to spread out along the sidewalk that led to the cavern. 7th graders, Penny thought, shaking her head. Penny stepped into the crowd and felt a tingle in her nose, and then a tingle in the center of her chest, just below the collar of her shirt. That was odd. Penny looked down and remembered her new necklace. Tucked under her light purple tank top, the key-shaped charm made a slight bump in the spot just above her sternum. The necklace, unlike Penny's body temperature and the surrounding air, maintained a radiant cool, as if it had just been pulled out of the refrigerator. Penny grasped the charm in her hand and then brought it to her cheek, as if it were an ice cube. Ah, that felt nice. Somewhat calmed by the new source of chill, Penny waded toward the front doors. If people would just move out of her way, she'd have time to splash some water on her face before class started. Penny never noticed how echoey the cavern was. Though she knew nobody was actually talking to her, voices sounding simultaneously distant and near from every direction swirled into her ears. Penny brushed shoulders, bumped the occasional backpack, and absorbed snippets of her classmates' conversation as she made her way through the crowd. Bits of conversations like stray puzzle pieces floated in and out of Penny's ears. TC is wearing that same shirt again. I wish I had toast for breakfast. Cole won't even look at me. Shayla has the best ponytail. My toe hurts. Dumb shoe choice. If I close my eyes, maybe nobody can see me. This will end. This will end. I should have snoozed my alarm more. My legs look like rectangles. The voices all swirled together like an egg just cracked into a batter. Not fully combined, but not separate either. Penny, thankful for the ice cube charm in her hand, ignored the trickle of sweat that fell down her back and pushed her way inside. Penny knew that Otis would be up early, but she couldn't help but check her phone every time a teacher turned their back. This at least 3 weeks thing was not going to cut it. By 3rd period, Penny was pulling out her phone every few minutes. Hand it over, Miss Hope. Penny looked up to see Mr. Turney towering over her. His wild nose hairs were on display. Penny quickly looked away and raised her hands like a criminal, dropping the phone in her lap. Wasn't me, she said. Mr. Turney held out his hand and waited. Reluctantly, Penny shoved her phone into his probably clammy paw. Busted, Cole mumbled from the back row. Penny fiddled with the key-shaped charm around her neck. Already, the jewelry felt like a bit of a security blanket. In front of her, Mateo tapped his foot on the ground in an inaudible beat. Tap, 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 tap. Annoying! Penny was about to ask him to cut it out when she heard him say,
Boogers are my main source of sodium, now that I think about it.
His voice sounded bizarre, echoey, but mostly Penny couldn't believe he said that out loud. And in the middle of class, what was he thinking? Penny gazed around the room, but nobody else seemed to have heard it. How was that possible? Penny looked back at Foot Tapper. He continued to tap away as if he hadn't just said the most ludicrous thing possible. Whoa! Just thinking about it made Penny's nose tingle. You can retrieve your dear mobile device after school, Miss Hope. With that, Mr. Turney tucked Penny's phone into the bottom drawer of his desk and continued the lesson on Greek mythology that Penny hadn't been listening to in the first place. Penny's Monday didn't exactly improve after her 3rd period cell phone confiscation. Miss Lee scolded her for zoning out. She couldn't argue with that. She realized at the start of lunch that she actually forgotten her lunch. Sitting right there on the kitchen counter, she could just see it. And Cole played some stupid trick to get Reem's attention. which resulted in Penny tripping over his backpack and nearly decapitating herself on the door of a locker. Cole didn't even apologize, though Reem did help her up. Finally, the day was over, and Penny made the necessary detour to Mr. Turney's room. She'd probably have countless messages from Otis by now. Hopefully, he wouldn't be mad that she hadn't responded. Nah, Otis could easily imagine what was up. He probably still held the world record for cell phone confiscations from back in his middle school days. "Welcome back, Miss Hope. Have thee repented?" Mr. Turney said as Penny walked into his classroom. On the first day of school, Mr. Turney had humble bragged that he had spent the summer performing at the Appalachian State Renaissance Fair. Nobody had been surprised or impressed. "Sure," Penny mumbled, hardly looking up. But then she did. And then she saw her. Gianna stood right at Mr. Turney's desk, cheery as ever. Penny sneezed immediately. "Bless you," Gianna said without actually looking at her. Then, "Thanks, Mr. Turney. Your support for the Thespians Association is much appreciated." Penny's cheeks burned. She grabbed her charm in efforts to cool off. Why wouldn't Gianna look at her? "My pleasure, Miss King. Just let me know what you need. Happy to help," Mr. Turney said from his seat behind the desk. Gianna smiled again, spun on her heel, and walked out the door.
I hope people like baked goods.
She heard Gianna's voice echo from behind her. If Mr. Turney hadn't interjected, Penny would have confirmed that, yes, anyone with a lick of sense liked a baked good. Weird thing to be concerned about. And Gianna's strange, echoey voice definitely sounded concerned. "Now, was your day that much worse without your phone?" Mr. Turney asked as he reached down to the bottom drawer of his desk. It seemed to take a surprising amount of effort. "I know, technology is evil. It's rotting our brains. I was finally able to smell the daisies, or roses, or whatever, all day long, and I'm a better person for it." Penny was in a sassy mood. Luckily, Mr. Turney had a sense of humor. Now that the school day was over, he appeared more relaxed. He grinned. "Never short on spunk, Miss Hope. Here you go." He handed her the phone. "Enjoy." Once in the hallway, Penny checked her text. Nothing. Not one word from Otis. Not one. Penny, for the billionth time that sticky Monday, pushed her bangs out of her eyes and headed home. There was only one thing that could lift her mood. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. Peanut butter lover cookies was the first recipe that Penny felt was her own. The base of the recipe came from an old Southern cookbook Otis had found at Tina's, but Penny added her own twist. A secret ingredient, if you will. Not even Otis knew what it was. Penny had memorized the recipe, measurements and steps by heart. She'd made them that many times. And as they were baking in the oven after school, only then did Penny remember her new recipe box from Tina's and have the idea to write hers for the cookies down. The recipe box could be her own little space for culinary treasures. It came with all those blank recipe cards. Might as well put them to use. "Don't let the cookies burn," Penny said to Sylvia as she walked out of the kitchen into her room, even though Penny would never be reckless enough to let her food burn. Sylvia sat at the kitchen table reading a book titled Honestly Jogs and taking notes in the margins with a red-colored pencil. "Cookies don't burn," she murmured, mind obviously elsewhere. "Exactly," Penny said with a chuckle as she trotted to her bedroom. Baking the cookies had put her in a better mood already. By the time the dinner Penny planned to make was in the oven, a simple but effective turkey and Spanish lasagna, Penny hoped her Monday funk would be long expired. Penny had left the recipe box on her nightstand. Traditionally, a recipe box belonged in the kitchen, but Penny didn't want to share anything about her new treasure, not even the sight of it. She knew that was a little selfish, but Penny didn't mind. Penny didn't consider herself a forgetful person. She knew countless recipes by heart, both simple, marinara sauce, lasagna, meatloaf, and more complex, sweet corn chowder, waffle batter, dulce leche. She'd have pasta cooking on the stove, vegetables roasting in the oven, and be making a salad dressing on the counter all at the same time, never forgetting to drain the penne or remove the carrots from the broiler. So when Penny opened the recipe box, she was shocked, both with what she saw and the fact that she hadn't noticed it before. The first card, right at the front of the stack, read, "Recipe name, The Secrets Necklace." Below, written out as if it was a recipe for pie or roast chicken or macaroni and cheese or an actual meal, were the ingredients and instructions. Penny truly remembered that all the recipe cards had been blank when she first gazed inside the box at Tina's treasures. Maybe she overlooked one? Certainly not the one in the front, though. Maybe they'd gotten shuffled during transport? Seemed unlikely. Penny wasn't reckless with her belongings. The overhead fluorescent light at Tina's was a little hazy now that Penny thought about it. Still, Penny was not a forgetful person. A recipe for a necklace, of all things, was not something she had overlooked. Strange. Very, very strange. Penny carefully removed the completed recipe card from the bright red interior of the box and sat on her bed cross-legged. She sat very still as she read, fearful that with any sudden movement, the writing would blow away like grains of salt in the wind. Recipe name, The Secrets Necklace. Ingredients. Number 1, Secrets Necklace, chain, key-shaped charm. Number 2, your neck. Duh, it's a necklace. Directions. Oven temperature, ghost pepper hot. Cook time, as long as necessary. Your secrets necklace will be the judge of that. Step 1. Wear your new secrets necklace around your neck. It's okay if it shows. It is beautiful after all. Step 2. Get within eavesdropping distance of a peer. Eavesdropping distance is a bit different for everybody. So a good way to judge is if you can hear them talking, silly. Step 3. Hold the charm on your secrets necklace in your hand. If you're hot, which you might be, you can touch it to your cheek. As you may have already noticed, your secrets necklace runs cold. That will feel nice, but not enhance the powers of the necklace in any way. Step 4. While holding your necklace, place your attention on those whose thoughts you wish to hear. Step 5. Listen. The echo means it's working. Fine print. This necklace is not effective on grown-ups or animals. Don't worry, pet lizards are not offended. For best results, do not substitute any of the ingredients or modify the steps in any way. And don't forget, keep it weird. Penny read the recipe again, and then again. She took a walk around her room, splashed some water on her face, and then read the recipe for a third time. She thought about texting Otis, but hesitated. Though the instructions didn't mention anything about it, Penny was certain that the secrets necklace information was meant for her and her alone. Penny thought back through her day. All the echoey voices she heard from the cavern before school, Mateo's bizarre comment during class, and her brief non-interaction with Gianna in Mr. Turney's room. Was it possible? Could the necklace that hung around her neck, that already felt like a permanent part of her body, allow her to hear the thoughts of those around her? That would be... Penny wasn't sure what it would be. Scary, right? What would it mean to know people's secrets? Penny reflected on the first 2 weeks of 7th grade. She thought about all the times she felt stupid around boys in her grade, self-conscious around the girls, and vice versa. And the sneezing. There'd been a lot of sneezing. Way too much sneezing. Everything about 7th grade was so embarrassing, mainly because it was so confusing. Maybe, just maybe, this secrets necklace, if it worked like the recipe promised, could clear things up. Whoa.
Cookies are doing something,
Sylvia screeched from the other room. Sylvia's articulation couldn't be counted on when she was in the middle of one of her books. Penny quickly put the recipe card back in the recipe box, shoved the container under her bed just in case. In case of what? And rushed into the kitchen. Her phone lay on the counter, timer beeping. "Timer," Sylvia said calmly as Penny arrived. "How long has it been going off?" Penny asked, still a little rattled.
Who knows? 30 seconds? 30 hours? Don't expect me to pay attention when Jocks is in the picture.
Sylvia gave her book a little shake and wiggled her eyebrows.
Gross, Sylvia,
Penny said, but Sylvia offered no indication she heard. Penny pulled the cookies out of the oven just in time. The edges were golden and crisp, and the centers puffed up with just the right amount of air. They were perfect. Little known fact, nutmeg, fresh grated nutmeg, really put the peanut in peanut butter. That was the secret ingredient. Penny discovered it by mistake and had never made a batch without the spice since. Penny hardly spoke at dinner that night. When Mom complimented her on the lasagna, Penny just nodded, sacrificing the opportunity to explain that she browned the turkey with an extra clove of garlic this time. When Mom retreated to the bedroom, Penny joined Dad on the couch. She wasn't quite ready to be alone. Together, they watched the lizards. Millions, Scraffy, and Rent were their names. Penny had named Millions. Otis claimed Scraffy's namesake, and Sylvia was responsible for Rent.
Because that's what he ought to be paying,
Sylvia crackled at her own jokes. No, Millions, Scraffy, and Rent didn't do much, but at times like this, they were nice to have around. 3 extra heartbeats under their roof was the way Penny thought about it. 7 heartbeats instead of 8 sounded heartier than 4 heartbeats instead of 5. Penny for your thoughts, Dad said after a few minutes.
I wouldn't have let you name me Penny if I'd known that's what you say to me every day.
$1 for your thoughts then, Dad countered.
2, in the form of a $2 bill.
Otis always kept a $2 bill in his wallet for good luck. Deal. Dad mimed, pulling his wallet out of his back pocket and slapping an invisible $2 bill into Penny's palm. Penny giggled. This act was familiar.
Otis said someone hid raw eggs in the grill cook's apron the other night,
Penny said, recounting the text she received earlier that evening.
He was so close to the grill that one of them cooked a little. The other ones, well, you can imagine.
Dad chuckled, but said nothing more. They settled into another easy silence. Millions joined Scraffy on a twig. The two perched together, waiting for something. Rent lay in the opposite corner. It was unclear if Rent was watching Millions and Scraffy, or if it was just the other way around. Maybe they were all watching each other. Lizard stare off. What's going on in that head of yours, Penny girl? Dad asked, breaking his daughter out of her reptilian daydream. Penny thought about how to answer. In short, a lot.
Do you think they're pals?
Penny asked, pointing to the 3 lizards in the tank. I hope so.
Me too,
Penny said, without realizing those were the words that were going to come out. Even lizards need pals.
Even lizards need pals,
Penny repeated. She fell asleep watching her pets that night, only to awake hours later, clammy, hot, and nearly suctioned to the pleather couch. Something had woken her up, but like a dream slipping away into the fog of sleep, Penny couldn't quite figure out what. When Penny tucked into her bed, toes poking out the bottom of her thin sheet, she felt a chill from her necklace through her shirt. Drowsily, only half awake, Penny closed her right hand over the charm and nestled deeper into her pillow. She fell back asleep immediately. That night, Penny dreamed she was Millions on his first day of skydiving school. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. First order of Secrets Necklace business, a slow wrap around the cafeteria. That really seemed like the best way. Such a stroll would grant Penny maximum eavesdropping access. Besides, when else would so many of her peers be stationary, congregated, and least likely to notice a 4'8" tall girl with thick blonde bangs prowling from table to table? Penny was excited to put her Secrets necklace to the test. She wouldn't look anyone in the eye. That seemed a little too suspicious. Not to mention bizarre in light of her crawling space. Penny preferred to listen in without being noticed. Incognito mode. Anyway, nowhere in the Secrets necklace recipe did it say she needed to make eye contact in order to effectively eavesdrop. It was Green Bean Day, aka Worst-smelling day of the week. Penny half expected to slow her lap to yield the same sentiment over and over. Why do green beans smell like farts? She identified the scent of the unimpressive vegetable before she even entered the cafeteria. From outside, Penny saw lunch was in full swing. Most tables were occupied, and voices, whoops, and some laughter blended together like a smoothie. Penny took one step toward the cafeteria entrance and sneezed, but she didn't turn back. Penny clasped her hand around her ever-cool key-shaped charm. Secrets necklace, slow lap lunch? Here I come, she whispered to herself. Penny had planned ahead. She'd consumed an extra big breakfast, so she wouldn't need to actually eat during lunch. Still, she got in the food line. Penny'd seen enough syndicated detective shows, Sylvia's fourth favorite pastime, to know that she couldn't just slow lap empty-handed. That would be suspicious and peculiar, and possibly hurricane-level sneeze-inducing. She couldn't risk it. Penny needed at least an apple juice in one hand to convincingly appear like she was searching for a place to sit, not telepathically snooping on all of her classmates. Mateo and an 8th grade girl Penny didn't know stood in front of her. Mateo was being, well, not Mateo-ish at all. That's to say, uncharacteristically quiet. Penny brought her left hand to the key-shaped charm around her neck, focused her attention on the duo, and listened. So then we had to turn the car around because we were totally going the wrong way, the girl said. Mateo nodded vigorously in response. Penny then heard him think.
Don't say a word. If my voice cracks, she'll know all about my puberty.
Which was such a waste of time because it was already like late in the afternoon, the girl said before thinking.
Mateo is such a good listener.
Mm-hmm, Mateo murmured before thinking.
Puberty is so embarrassing.
And we wanted to get to the lighthouse by sunset. For selfies, obviously.
I'll show him a selfie, but only if he asks.
Mateo made a face that implied, of course, though he thought,
life is so embarrassing.
But then my phone died.
My phone's not dead now.
Another silent Mateo nod as he thought,
if my voice cracks, she'll hate me.
And we were like 5 minutes too late for sunset anyways, the girl complained, then thought,
please ask to see a selfie. Please, please.
Mm-hmm.
And if she hates me, then I'll just die. So don't talk. Don't talk.
And I guess that's why I don't do the Gulf of Mexico anymore. Before Penny had time to listen to another one of the girl's thoughts, Mateo said, I have to go. As soon as he sped away, Penny heard him think,
why did I do that? Why did I do that? Everything is so horrible and embarrassing. He hates me.
The girl thought. Oof, that was brutal. Penny had no idea cracking voices was such a preoccupation for 7th grade dudes. Finally, Penny had an apple juice in hand and was ready to go. She cruised by the table where the theater kids sat first.
I'm so bad at mask work.
Penny heard it first.
If I don't get a lead in the spring musical, I'll die. Stella Adler and Stanislavski are basically the same, right?
Penny remembered the time she tried to sit with them, and how confused she'd been by all their talk of various acting techniques. Turns out, she wasn't alone. At the next table, Penny heard a boy wearing hiking boots think,
I'm not cool enough to sit with them.
Clearly referring to the theater kids. When Penny sneaked a glance to match the face with the thought, her eyes landed on a dude surrounded by 3 girls, obviously vying for his attention. Hiking boots Romeo looks pretty cool to me, Penny thought to herself. Half a lap later, she approached Cole's table. Penny nearly turned around. No doubt Cole's inner monologue would only reveal mean jokes and crude comments. Penny wasn't sure she wanted to know any of that. But before she could make a decision, she was well within the eavesdropping bubble of his table. Cole sat across from two girls from their homeroom. Their conversation faded into background noise, and their echoey thoughts moved to the forefront, sounding the way a distant mirage on a desert highway might look.
Why won't Cole talk to me? Why won't Cole stop talking to me? I bet if I flex my muscles, my armpit hair will grow longer and faster. Yeah, do it, Cole.
Sure enough, Cole flexed. One girl giggled and the other rolled her eyes. Next were the gang of compounding scientists. Penny saw that they all examined a single printout of the periodic table. Penny held her charm tight and watched the group. So, can we all commit to memorizing the chart by next week? Samson asked. Penny noticed he tapped his toe on the ground, as if communicating in Morse code. The other members of the group murmured in agreement.
Should I tell Jane?
Penny heard a girl twin think.
What's the big deal, right? We've had crushes before. Who cares if mine's is on Samson? Right? Right. But really, right?
Penny shifted her attention to Jane and heard,
Samson is so bossy.
So, Janiyah had a crush on Samson, and now Penny knew the difference between the two girls. Score! Penny lapped on, and on, and on. She kept her eyes trained on torsos and sneakers, bouncing her attention from one classmate to the next, careful to avoid eye contact at all costs. She learned that a girl who always had perfectly curled hair and an outfit straight out of a fashion magazine stressed that she presented as a messy slob. A shy girl that Penny had never actually heard speak daydreamed about playing electric guitar on stage in front of thousands of screaming fans. Ryder, the bully who liked to smack the top of Penny's head with his comic book to prove how short she was, claimed he only ate fast food and always got in trouble for sleeping in class, also shared a bedroom with 3 younger siblings and desperately missed his dad and wondered when he'd be back. Penny moved on quickly, intuiting that any more on that topic was Ryder's business, not hers. Penny had meant to get at least 2 passes by Gianna, Naeli, and Rose's table, but she'd been too nervous. Just the thought of them noticing and calling her out for snooping or acting strange or funny or bizarre or anything but completely normal was so mortifying. Penny nearly sneezed just thinking about it. Though not everything Penny heard was enlightening, much of it was funny. A clique at a center table eagerly discussed their plans to go roller skating that coming weekend. The girls' thoughts revealed their concerns with logistics, like transportation, costumes. Roller skating was a costume thing, Penny also learned, and arrival time, while the boys wondered,
Why are Tootsie Pops called Tootsie Pops? What's a Tootsie? I wish someone could just go pee for me.
and
Do whales live in whales?
the world would be a much sillier place if people actually expressed what was going on in their heads. What's your deal, loose change? Max asked the 3rd time she passed by his table. The cafeteria wasn't huge. One very slow lap hardly took any time at all. Lunch was half over, and Penny had already completed 3 loops. Slow walking aids digestion, Penny explained quickly, ignoring his 1 part clever, 2 parts rude nickname. Penny could think on her feet like a pro. Okay, weirdo, Max retorted before turning back to Theo and TC. Tingle, spark, tingle. Penny gripped her secrets necklace in her left hand and braced herself to hear Max's potentially not so nice thought about her.
Theo and TC like each other better than they like me. They're probably hanging out without me all the time. talking about camp and all the fun stuff they did while I was actually being a responsible counselor. They're gonna forget about me.
Penny heard Max think. That surprised Penny. Max always seemed like the ringleader of that little threesome. She never would have guessed in a million years that he felt left out by the two boys who followed him around night and day. But that wasn't all. Max didn't have a nasty thing to say about her. He was much more focused on himself and his own problem du jour. Penny considered taking another slow lap, maybe counterclockwise this time, just to shake it up. But her brain felt full. Thank goodness she had control over the activation of the secrets necklace. Hearing everybody else's thoughts for just a few moments at a time was exhausting. Penny released the charm from her grasp and retreated to the familiar spot at the very corner of the very corner table in the cafeteria. Some of the thoughts Penny heard were hilarious. Some were downright informative, but most were surprising, like being presented with a devil's food cake only to cut in to find the dense chocolate icing concealed fluffy white cake instead of a rich chocolate center. No, Penny realized the outside does not always match the inside when it comes to 7th grade. With access to a secret world that had always existed beyond her scope, it felt to Penny like being able to breathe underwater. For a second, Penny felt guilty, like she was cheating or stealing secrets rather. Penny tucked that thought away. It was too much to think of now. She was still a secrets necklace amateur after all. Just then, the girl with the oversized lime green headphones sat down at the other end of Penny's table. She was in Penny's ELA class, but Penny didn't know her name. In fact, she'd never even heard her speak, though she curiously appeared simultaneously meek and wise. The girl's eyes were very big and very dark brown. She ate a red apple in tiny bites, chewing completely between each baby chomp. She wore a jean jacket, and from the breast pocket, she pulled a notebook and a very professional-looking pen. When she took the cap off, Penny saw the tip was no bigger than a grain of table salt. When the girl opened her notebook, Penny saw a drawing depicting a cityscape in such detail it nearly took Penny's breath away. Penny found herself leaning closer to get a better look. The lines of the sketch were so fine, they reminded Penny of strands of hair. Penny wondered what urban landscape warranted such care and attention. Oh, wait a second. Penny didn't actually have to wonder. Penny brought her finger up to her necklace, placing her tip of her pinky on the small stone at the top of the key-shaped charm. The shade of the girl's eyes, Penny realized, weren't that dissimilar from the color of that stone that Penny had such trouble describing. Penny listened.
Worst day ever, worst day ever, worst day ever.
Lime green headphones thought. Penny listened again to see if she could learn more.
Time move faster, time move faster, time move faster. Worst day ever, worst day ever.
Penny dropped her pinky, and the echoey thoughts ceased. Penny stole another glance. Lime green headphones continued to nibble on her apple and add a line here and a mark there to her already magnificent piece of artwork. Penny sensed the other kids in the cafeteria start to get up, downshifting from lunchtime horseplay vibes back to academic mode. Penny felt a similar spark in her nose, then a tingle. Spark? Spark? Tingle? How could someone with the ability to create such a thorough world with just a pen and a piece of paper be having such a terrible day? Tingle, tingle, spark! Before Penny could stop herself, she waved her hand to get the girl's attention. Lime green headphones looked up at Penny. Penny waved again. Tingle, spark, spark! The girl slowly exposed one part of her ear, keeping the headset mostly on. Penny lightly touched her secrets necklace just in case. What city is that? Penny asked, gesturing to the drawing on the earpiece. New York, the girl answered, as if she didn't want to part with the information. Then Penny heard the girl think,
It's me!
Wow. Penny felt another spark in her nose. It's really... Penny searched for the right word. Beautiful? Sure. Detailed? Obviously. Astonishing? Without a doubt. None of those words quite captured the feeling the image inspired.
Real,
Penny said. Penny had never been to New York, but the illustration made the pulse of the far-off city feel true.
alive.
Penny added. Thanks, the girl peeped.
That's where I'm from.
She thought, but didn't say out loud. Lime green headphones girl still seemed so sad, and the sketch of New York City felt more alive each second that passed. So Penny added,
That's your home.
Oops, Penny had just given herself away. The girl hadn't actually said she was from New York. She just thought it. It's my home. I miss it. How did you know?
Lucky guess?
Penny's shaky excuse seemed to do the trick. Lime green headphones went back to her work. The girl took another bite of her apple, revealing a fleck of the brown seed from deep inside the core. Then lime green headphones smiled. Not at Penny, just to her apple. Penny gave the key-shaped charm around her neck a little pat, the way she did to millions sometimes when she walked past the tank on her way to the kitchen and stood to go. Penny felt a shy tug on the back of her t-shirt as she walked away. I'm Lark, lime green headphones said. Her smile was small, but still there.
Penny!
Penny felt the last remnants of a spark in her nose dissolve. She wasn't going to sneeze after all.
That's me!
Penny thought to secret necklace Lark one last time, but she had already scuttled away, no longer within eavesdropping range. Chapter 8